Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on from wherever it is that you're joining us today. We've got attendees, I know, from all over the globe today. So I'd like to say hello to everyone, and not to mention our speakers as well, joining us from all over Asia and the UNDP headquarters in New York. Thank you, everyone, for spending some time with us today for this event. Before we begin, allow me to introduce myself very quickly. My name is Melissa Idris. I am joining you live from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and I'm a senior editor and anchor with Astro Awani, which is a news network here in Malaysia, and I'm going to be your host for this event. So welcome to the first ever virtual Istanbul Innovation Days event. It's the first time that we're having this across the globe and spread over 8 weeks, hosting some of the most brilliant and experienced speakers who are working on some really cool ideas about how to solve the challenges that impact the future of development. So I will be back with you in a little bit, but to kick things off first, I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Kani Vignaraja, the Assistant Secretary General, Assistant Administrator, and Director of the Regional Bureau for Asia and the Pacific for UNDP. Let's hear her opening remarks. Over to you, Kani.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And first, let me welcome our wonderful panel members and you, our amazing moderator. I know you will be introducing them as we go forward. So I also want to say hello to our online audience who are joining us across regions. And this is the Asia Pacific chapter, if you wish, of our Istanbul Innovation Days. And we're here to really discuss the future of digital transformation, and all of you in different ways are part of this exciting journey. And for us in UNDP, the reason we are involved in this is not just because the world is excited about digital, but because we are excited with the world about human development. And that to us is very similar to the story of humans, which is one of constant evolution. And that's just as it should be. And very few things can keep up with that evolution. Digital is one of them. And I think at various points in our histories, we've had to face very important decisions about the kind of lives we want to live, the type of world we want to live in, and what we need to do in terms of a vision, but also our collective action to get there. And for a large part of that, we've not had or not been accompanied by the digital adventure. And now we are. It's very much a part of our lives. And we saw this probably more vividly through the COVID stress test that we were put through globally last year. And I know that some of the chat from last week was looking at this as well. And all of you, in one way or the other, have been so essential to this, not just a conversation, but to making things happen, changing the way we work, the way we govern, the way we invest, what we produce, the way we behave, basically, as both individuals and as societies. So at the heart of today's discussion is the future we want to design and be a part of. And how do we get there using digital transformation as a key leverage and something we now have in our toolbox, probably much more so than ever before. So this is what we want to probe with you today. And what I would like to see is how we leverage digital opportunity to really make it a better life for all. We sometimes tend to get stuck in talking through the bad stuff, the gaps, the inequalities, and we're worried. We can't get out of bed every morning because we're thinking we're part of automating inequalities or digitizing discrimination. So this panel is going to look at the glass is full approach, and get to where we can really push the positive agenda, and to enable issues of equality, greater justice, fairness, and citizens' engagement. So the rules of the game, what needs to change in how we work with digital transformation, is as if not more important than the technology itself. So I know we marvel at the new AIs and algorithms, but I'm putting my bet on people's ingenuity and capabilities and our sense of justice and protecting those fundamental freedoms in the digital space. So a warm welcome again to our great speakers and all participants, and we hope you will enjoy this discussion. Back to you, Melissa.
Kani, thank you so much. I really love that that approach, the idea of taking a positive approach, looking at this from a glass half full perspective. I'm hoping that in this panel discussion, I mean, yes, we know that the pandemic has really exacerbated inequalities in society. Everything from access to basic healthcare for the poor, and the millions who lack tech skills when it comes to this increasingly digital economy. But let's focus on the solutions. Let's focus on what we can do, where we can make those significant investments and give the continued support, not just in the digital transformation efforts, but also in efforts to continue societal digital capabilities. So to discuss all of that, the urgency of that, and how we can seize that opportunity to build back better, allow me to introduce the members of our panel today. First up, Mr. Achim Schneider. He is the administrator of the UNDP since 2017. He's a global leader on sustainable development, climate resilience, economic growth, and equality for the vulnerable. We're delighted to have him here today. Secondly, Ms. Mira Taiba, Secretary General of the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology for Indonesia, also known there as the Kominfo Ministry. She's been involved in Indonesia's national e-commerce roadmap and has extensive expertise within this field. Dr. Anna Roy is our third panelist, a senior advisor at the National Institution for Transforming India, or better known as NITI Aayog. NITI Aayog functions as a policy think tank for the government, and they aim to actualize sustainable development goals for India. Joining us from the Philippines is Dr. Litha de Guzman. She's the director of the Department of Health for the Philippines, a specialist with the Epidemiology Bureau. And it's a big day for the Philippines. As I understand it, they're rolling out their national vaccination plan. So a little bit more on that with Dr. Jamila, the moderator, a bit later. And last but not least, Sushant Kumar. He leads Omidyar Network's responsible technology efforts, which is focused on advancing an equitable data economy. Sushant is also a member of the WEF Global Future Council on Data Policy. And our moderator for this session, I am delighted to introduce Dr. Jamila Mahmud, who has for the past year been the special advisor to the Prime Minister of Malaysia on public health. Now, she was previously the Undersecretary General for Partnerships for the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies based in Geneva. Dr. Jamila, I'm handing it over to you for the panel discussion.
Thank you, Melissa, and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be able to moderate such an esteemed panel on such an important topic as well. So let's cut to the chase, and perhaps we will get the ball rolling. If I can direct my first question to Mr. Achim Steiner. Achim, digital rights are now an extension of human rights as access to digital spaces becomes a basic necessity. One might argue it has already entered the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need internet access for online classes, especially now during the pandemic, working from home, to generally be connected with a lot of government-led updates as well. So how will this change the role of governments and international organizations in fostering an inclusive and responsible digital governance?
Thank you, Dr. Mahmoud, dear fellow panelists, and everybody joining us for this Istanbul Innovation Days. And as Kani said, with a focus on, well, 60% of the world's population, that is the region that we call region for Asia and the Pacific in the world of UNDP. And I'm very grateful that we are taking a perspective that is positive and forward-looking, because so much of what we're experiencing right now is really rather more characterized by notions of disruption and a lot of distress. And I think in looking at digital and looking at digital transformation, there are perhaps three ways right now in which I would answer your question. One is purely from the technology-driven horizon, and it is an extraordinary horizon right now, as you know better, and I love the backdrop that you have on your Zoom call. It says everything in terms of the age we're in. But technology-driven change has always had, in a sense, a reality of opportunities, but also of risks. And I'll address that in a moment, particularly from that rights perspective. The second, I think, is this extraordinarily compressed learning period that we have just gone through and are continuing to go through, namely the crisis of the pandemic. And I think it is fair to say that perhaps somewhere between 5 to 10 years is perhaps the forwarding of what otherwise would have been developments that would have continued to unfold in a world without the pandemic. And thirdly, and this is something that UNDP and what we call Next Gen UNDP has also been focusing on since 2017, 18, and 19, how does digital transform the future of development? And I think to your point, certainly technology creates opportunities and phenomenal possibilities. Just look at the digital finance and the transformations. Look at some of the schemes that my fellow panelists will speak to. Anna, for example, from Niti Aayog in India with Aadhaar, but also Bangladesh and many other countries that have set up digital telemedicine platforms, cash transfer schemes. I mean, we have seen extraordinary things happen already in the lead up to 2020, but then particularly through 2020, an explosion both in terms of new approaches, but also scaling. And I think the scaling is particularly dramatic because it is going to redefine the future of virtually every aspect of development. Now, here comes the challenge. How do we as societies shape a digital ecosystem that is characterized both by the possibilities and opportunities, but also by notions that essentially define whether our societies advance together? Inclusion, equity, from the basics of internet and broadband access to school curricula that prepare our school leavers to, in fact, enter into an economy that will be increasingly driven by digital skill sets. How do we also address the issue of rights, rights to privacy, but also protecting the integrity of transfer platforms, for instance, in our financial system? The emergence of Bitcoin and other possibilities like this have clearly shown us that we are going through a revolutionary period. And I think perhaps the Secretary General's Digital Cooperation Panel put it very aptly when it said, we have spent the last 50, 60, 70 years developing a regime of fundamental rights, of principles, the Declaration of Human Rights. And in many ways, it is interesting because in the advent of digital technology, we seem to sometimes assume that all that which we consider to be fundamental to human rights, to rights of privacy and protection of individuals, but also the principles of inclusion, somehow cease to be relevant when we move from analog to digital. And that obviously is a big mistake, because fundamental rights don't cease to be relevant, nor do they cease to be peripheral in a digitally driven economy and society. And so the role of government and of the state is to provide an expression of public principles and priorities, namely, what is the kind of society that we would like to drive forward? How do we invest in it? How do we ensure inclusion, equity, access, privacy? These are elements that define the ecosystem within which either digitalization will drive development in a positive way, or it may create more bifurcated societies. So it is both a legislative, but it is also a set of incentives, it is policies, it is investments in the ecosystem that allow everybody to participate in this digital economy. And then also obviously to deal with the fact that digitalization provides sometimes extraordinary opportunities for market domination. We live in a world where a few corporations today essentially have provided us with extraordinary platforms, but with it has come also a degree of control and centralization that is, at least to many, of high concern. And even in basic economics, monopolies are never a very healthy way in which to develop the economy. And let me end by also saying that in the United Nations as a whole, led by the Secretary General, who has repeatedly called on the world, and particularly the world's governments, to ensure that we don't allow geopolitics to create the conditions where perhaps we end up with two parallel worlds, two separate internets, two parallel universes within which we are trying to essentially harness technology. And everything that digitalization is offering us is ultimately dependent on the ability to communicate, to interact, to trade information, knowledge, and access with one another. So this is another concern that is very much at the forefront of how the United Nations as a whole is working with governments. But at the end of the day, we in UNDP, the United Nations Development Programme, are above all heavily engaged in countries across the globe right now and learning from them, because innovation is happening everywhere, not just developed nations or richer nations. In fact, some of the poorer nations have been some of the greatest innovators in this digital space. And so for us, the future of development is unambiguously digital, but the way we shape it will define whether it is a successful future of development. Back to you, Dr. Mahmood.
Thank you so much. I think that was a really amazing, very comprehensive, succinct in its own way to try and address all these very important issues. Now, governments worldwide have done more this past year than in the last decade, and COVID has certainly accelerated, how we've looked at digital transformation. But to achieve that speed, that scale, governments cannot operate by the traditional customer service provider relationship. Now, Indonesia, it has been one of the countries in this region, particularly in ASEAN, that has really moved very fast on the digital front. Perhaps if I can turn to Ibu Mira, what are the new service delivery patterns emerging, and how do we ensure that no one is truly left behind?
Thank you for giving me the floor, Dr. Jamila. So, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Greetings from Jakarta, Indonesia. Well, it obviously has been a challenging year for all of us. Coronavirus has disrupted our lives in so many ways. Not only has the virus impacted the health sector, it also has affected our economy and social well-being. And now, wherein the work on vaccines development are progressing so well, and the vaccination even have been started since mid-January in Indonesia, we have a glimpse of confidence that we will pick up our lives and move forward to the next normal. On a different note, the COVID-19 has left a huge footprint on digital transformation. Basically, it showcases the importance of digital technology. One of our digital showcases during the COVID-19 is the digitalization of MSMEs, specifically micro and small businesses. Our MSMEs contribute about 60% to Indonesia GDP and absorb about 97% of our workforce. However, they got hit quite bad during the pandemic. So by collaborating with digital platforms, the government facilitated 3.4 million new micro and small businesses to go online in less than 7 months last year. Besides e-commerce, the use of digital technology also becomes the backbone for our activities, such as working from home, distance learning, and even consulting to medical doctors or making appointments for COVID-19 tests through digital apps to avoid unnecessary exposure to COVID-19 by visiting hospitals. In addition, the government has launched the tracking, tracing, fencing platform, Peduli Lindungi, it is Care and Protect in our Bahasa, and supported the development of one-stop information platform, United Against COVID-19. In order to support the vaccination program for about 181.5 million recipients out of the 270 million Indonesia population, the government also utilizes a comprehensive One Data digital system for vaccination, which provides an integrated platform to handle vaccination management, from the vaccine registration, vaccine distribution, to certificate issuance for recipients. And based on our experience, we noted a number of must-haves in doing digital transformation. First is digital infrastructure, the core principle to connect and to connect the unconnected. These issues include availability as well as affordability of the services. The second is digital literacy and skills. One of the issues is the ability to make productive use of the internet. People need to have the ability to select, sort, and digest of what is circulating in the internet, considering there are so many hoax and disinformation in the internet to the point that false information may be accepted as the truth when it goes viral and referred by many. The third is related to data privacy and security, which covers, among others, how to safeguard from the misuse and abuse of data, as well as to protect personal data. And the fourth is the use of big data and synergy to create one data as single reference. To support digital transformation agenda, the Ministry of Communication and Informatics has introduced a number of programs. First, of course, we accelerate the digital infrastructure rollout, includes deployment of 4G services in 12,548 uncovered villages out of more than 83,000 villages in Indonesia by next year. Development of a high-throughput broadband satellite to be launched in 2023. Terrestrial television migration from analog to digital by November 2nd next year, and trial of 5G. The second program is related to digital skills. Along with our National Digital Literacy Movement program, we also launched our flagship programs called Digital Talent Scholarship, already certified 34,000 digital talents last year. We are ambitious to increase the target number to 100,000 new participants this year. In addition, we have developed Indonesia Digital Transformation Roadmap in strategic sectors, including in the government public service centers, education, and health sector. We also complete the discussion on the draft law of personal data protection with the House of Representatives. And on top of that, we also, of course, collaborate with UNDP to do a few things, one of which is the digital maturity assessment. We are finalizing the MOU, so hopefully we can sign it by the first quarter this year. So Dr. Jamila, in short, digital transformation is not an option. It already becomes a necessity or a must. And through this forum, we encourage collaboration among stakeholders, and we welcome regional cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ibu Mira. You mentioned two words that really caught my attention. One is you used the word next normal, and the other thing was you used the word collaboration twice. And I'm really glad that you didn't use the word the new normal, because we don't know what that new normal is, and we'll move from one next normal to the other. So, you know, in return to, and I think returning to what we thought was normal before is probably not a good idea as well. So, so I think I'd like to turn to Dr. De Guzman from Philippines. How can we harness and sustain the how can we sustain the community spirit and digital capabilities presented through the pandemic to define what might be that next normal?
Yeah, let me just share first that when this pandemic first hit the Philippines, one of the major concerns and issues we had was being able to provide fast, reliable, and relevant data that would give us the visibility to identify where this virus is, how fast was it spreading, and what would be the effective measures for us to contain. So one of the first things that we had to address was having to strengthen our own digital or internal data governance capacities. And for that, we're very grateful for the support that we have been provided by a number of our private partners, as well as our international organizations. So we have the World Health Organization and the UNDP through its FinTech Lab now, which accelerated this process for us. We were also able to develop these data pipelines and then engineer it into a cloud-based architecture that would automatically process as well as analyze and prepare data for analysis and reporting, and that provided us more time to devote into interpreting our data as well as providing these recommendations. And to enable trust, the trust of the public in our data, we have anonymized data drops that we publish or we release daily through the DOH website, and this is open to our researchers as well as other partners, and it enabled us to have more opportunities for innovation with other groups as well as our academe. And there were also other systems like Tanod Contra COVID, which is a syndromic surveillance platform that enabled us to crowdsource these flu-like symptoms. We use Viber, we use FB Messenger. And lastly, I think one of the major platforms that we worked on was Pastor. So it's a disease modeling platform which was developed with one of our universities, the Ateneo de Manila University, and also supported by UNDP. And it collated all of this information so that we know what's going on now, as well as project what's a viral transmission in the next few months. And this is actually a major source of information for our interagency task force that determines the LGU classification as well as our community quarantine classifications, and also used by our local governments to determine how well or what kind of strategy they should implement, what's more targeted and appropriate to them. And all of these that we have innovated in terms of digital technologies and systems, we're already seeing all of these in the improvement of our quality, the quality of our data. We're also seeing better reporting times. We used to have like 2 weeks delay. Now it's less than a week's delay for our reporting. And it also enabled us to measure the impact of our response. So one of the things we were constantly relaying is because of the projections and estimations, we are able to measure that because of government response, we were able to prevent an estimated 3.5 million infections nationwide. And going on to what we call a better normal, we want to make sure that the capacities we have now, it will not be, it will have to be sustained. It will have to be in place in case there will be a next health crisis. And we realize that the best way for us to approach these crises is number one, involving not just the government, it's a whole of society, it's a multi-sectoral approach, and one wherein our actions are dictated by science and by data. So we need to evolve a lot of these platforms, and we need to also ensure that the perspective, the anticipation and the preparation we need to be in place will be from a multitude of perspectives. So for government, it's being able to identify the resources that we need, what measures should be in place so that if ever a next crisis happens, there should be as minimal disruption to our services as possible. From the civil society, what would be the messages we need to be able to put across to our community so that they will be aligned to the national guidelines and to the strategies of government. And from our private sectors, so from our business partners, is what's their investment, what's their investment into what government and what the communities are doing. And again, these anticipatory practices should be in place, not just for crises such as COVID, but for all other crises that we may face. So these are just a few of our thoughts on what this better normal would be. And again, we're very grateful for the support of our partners, and we would be very pleased to continue our work with the UNDP, and very open to expanding our partnerships so to include other organizations working in the area of digitalization for anticipatory governance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. De Guzman. Earlier on, Kani mentioned that we can talk about digital, we can talk about technology, but at the end of the day, it's the indomitable human spirit and the ability to rise, apart from despite all the crises that we face. Now, the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic have undoubtedly been quite significant or very significant among young people, and they are the digital natives. There is almost if you talk to young people, certainly I try to talk to many of them, there's a very mixed bag, right? But there is almost a collective loss of hope, as many feel that their futures, their trajectory for growth now faces a reset. In many developing countries, and particularly in our region as well, in Asia Pacific, the youth population is expected to increase by 62% by 2050 in the developing world. Now, if I can turn to you, Dr. Anna Roy, what would this mean for the future of education and healthcare in digital terms?
Thank you, Dr. Mahmood, and I thank UNDP for giving me this opportunity to share my views. I think India comes with Akim also mentioned some of the things which has happened in India. So I think the digital revolution which started in our country and really kind of strengthened in 2014. So a base was developed. So we have something called India Stack. 1.3 billion of the population has a unique ID. We have e-signature, we have DigiLocker, and several other things which together constitute the what we call as the India Stack, and which kind of helped us in making a big move in the digital payment space. Not only in the digital payment space. Now, we have this UPI, which is a common platform. And this really kind of showed the power of going digital. And the same India Stack was again kind of replicated in certain manner when we came out with the National Health Stack. So our approach before the pandemic, much before the pandemic, was to kind of leverage the digital wealth. And because of all these initiatives, India really became a very data-rich country. Having said that, you asked me specifically for health and education, so I will restrict my comments to these two. Now, for both health and education, inclusivity is the biggest thing. And when you talk about digital, what happens is, say, if you are taking online classes. Now, in brick and mortar versus online, I feel the latter creates the divide much more and has a much more potential for creating a divide, because now the students sitting in the same classroom may be having different access to different kind of resources. So the impact, in my personal view, is much more than what a brick and mortar is. In a brick and mortar, I may be excluded, so I'm not able to attend a class, attend a school. But in a digital divide, I may be, I am in the class, but because of my disadvantages, I do not have access to such resources which can give me a certain level of education as the boy or girl sitting next to me. So I think for the youth, the trauma the digital divide brings in is much more. Second, all of us are from a generation where we still went to the libraries, where we looked for books, where we worked for our papers. Today, the information is on your fingertips. What I work with a very young team in Niti Aayog, and I keep telling them that you have so much of information, but please do not stop reading. This cut and paste culture which has seeped in, because so much of with this information explosion, what happens that our capacity to absorb information goes down. And we have, on the flip side, a number of other problems which come in with this information explosion, the social media, various other things. So on the education side, the government of India has been very, very conscious about these issues. And we are trying, we have gone through the technology platform approach. When I call the technology platform, it is basically building common public good so that you democratize access to resources. We in the digital product space, we use the UPI to the advantage of all. So today, your people from every strata, inclusivity is the cornerstone. So people from every strata has an access to a formal banking channel and can use their mobile because of data being so cheap. Mobile network is extremely, extremely spread, and it is used extensively. So that is one of the reasons why we were able to, achieve those advances in the digital payment space. So access to mobile network, access to official banking channels, all this have really made people digitally more savvy. Including the youth, so they are more kind of they accept these things much more, and those behavioral challenges that we may feel is not there. In the education space, also we are going through this technology platform channel, and also on the skilling part, because the technology is changing so fast, and we still call the IR 4.0 as the emerging technology. We really do not know how it will shape tomorrow. And when we talk about work in future, we do not know really what modeling you can do, what kind of planning you need to do for work for future. So this reskilling thing is a continuous exercise. So we have a separate ministry which looks at skilling, and our human resource development ministry was renamed with a re-emphasis on digital, and now it is called Ministry of Education. So both this ministry, along with other state governments and other federal agencies, are really focused at these several pronged things. One is how to overcome the digital divide from the resource allocation side, so that you have the infrastructure, you have access to devices. Second, on providing a public good kind of platform approach, which allows you to reskill yourselves, both for the people who are working as well as for students, to be kind of have more hands-on approach for these emerging technologies, with the focus on work from future works kind of aspect, how the entire landscape will change, and of course access to education with more MOOCs and with more such programs. On the health side, the action is much more. We launched the National Digital Health Mission. That is again a stack approach, where we are trying to again democratize and provide access, and with the focus on inclusion. So we started off with a certain segment of people. Going forward, what we are trying to do is develop this data platform, so that everybody, like Aadhaar, where you have unique identities, in the National Digital Health Mission also, there is, every person will have a unique identity, so that I can use the cloud network, the DigiLocker, which is there. I can use other such network to store my reports, my other such data, and it can be accessed in every hospital. So providing access, allowing pan-India kind of a thing, and of course leveraging all this digital data that we are developing into developing tools which will help us in overcoming the access barriers, developing tools which help us in predicting diseases. So focus is now on wellness, on prevention, focusing on hub and spoke kind of a network, where you do not have to kind of go to big cities for getting access, and every strata of the population gets access to the best care. We in Niti Aayog ourselves have brought out several policy papers. We started off with the National Strategy on AI in 2018, where we coined the term AI for all, and after that we saw the use of this term by many organizations globally, and that their AI for all basically was how to leverage technology for providing services in sectors like health, education, agriculture, etc. We have stressed on democratization in infrastructure. So we have come out with a paper on providing compute infrastructure. Data is something which we are working on, so that data is easily available and not concentrated, in a few big organizations who are able to leverage it and come out with tools. So that is another stress. And the most two very important things, one is data sharing, a consent-based data sharing, because unless you overcome these privacy concerns and you kind of allow data to be shared, you cannot leverage this. And last but not the least is responsible AI. In fact, today only we had a meeting with our local UNDP office and the UN representatives on, we last week released the paper on responsible AI, setting the ball rolling, because we feel going forward, unless we understand the flip side of the technology, we run the danger of, having unintended results. COVID really kind of gave a greater push to all this. With the telemedicine thing, we around more than 500 million, dollars of deals were done by the medtech startups. So, and, today, in fact, we launched the phase 2 of our vaccination. We successfully completed the phase 1. In phase 2, we are covering another segment of the population. And there also we are leveraging technology, because we have an app-based solution where we are able to direct the vaccines to the person who are the targeted beneficiary, so that there is no pilfering. So we are leveraging digital to the extent possible. On the other side, we are also conscious about all the problems which comes with digital divide and so on. And those are also being handled in parallel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Anna Roy. Thank you so much. Such rich information there. Now, we can't leave without talking about power, and power dynamics in digital spaces are a reflection of that in our physical reality. So if I could turn to you, Dr. Sushant Kumar, how can we then create distributed networks in a world where access is not equal? How to reset these relationships, not just to governments, but also in digital economies, to shift this power back to people, to citizens, or to users. So very briefly, Sujan, because we are running out of time soon. So could you share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you very much for having me on this panel. And thank you, Dr. Mahmood, for the fascinating, although I must say very difficult question to answer. And I've been really learning through all the esteemed panelists on this. And I've been really struck by a comment that was made earlier, which was about digital transformation is not an option, but it's a necessity. And of course, it's more of a necessity for countries such as India, where even after you have 600 million people with smartphones, you're still staring at a problem where there are another 200 to 300 million people who wouldn't have access to a smartphone or an internet, and that's just getting there. And therefore, thinking about inclusivity, thinking about equity in such societies, in such countries is also very, very important. And also thinking about how decisions are made and for whom decisions are made and what is the process of that decision making, so that it shifts the power balance towards equitable outcomes is all the more important. So briefly, I would like to just summarize through 4 points. Number one is, we've all seen, and Dr. Anna Roy very eloquently mentioned the experience of India through India Stack. So tech platforms have been a very good support, a very good efficiency enhancer, a multiplier to all the governance efforts that the government has put in place. However, all the decision making, and as we have seen in the times of COVID as well, all decision making is political. And therefore, good politics and good decision making will lead to better public outcomes. Thankfully, in democratic societies, the relationship of tech, data, and society is shaped by democratic processes. And that can be a magnifier, a multiplier of how technology can augment capacity achieve over a billion population scale and ensure that when you are utilizing data for evidence-based decision making, you can get access to that high frequency data and all the inputs that are needed to make good decisions. And as we say in the case of India, when we talk about the platform, which is Aadhaar or India Stack that has enabled access to hundreds of millions of people, there are essentially three layers. First layer is the technology layer. The second layer is the governance layer. That's where, who is taking decisions? What is the process of taking those decisions? What is the process of design? All of that is taken into consideration. And the third layer is the community. How are we getting inputs and from the community? How are we getting participation from the community? The second point, so the first point was, all decision making is political. The more evidence-based and scientific it is, we'll have better outcomes. The second is ensuring equity and inclusion by design. And I'll very quickly give an example. I spoke about how there are over 600 million smartphone users, but India, in terms of vaccine delivery, in terms of information about coronavirus, has utilized other offline infrastructure put through the government interventions in place. Examples of that are the common service centers. So there are over 3,500 common service centers, which can also help individuals get access to some of these digital services. And there are over 200,000 village level entrepreneurs who then provide an assisted mode for ensuring that there's better access, ensuring that people are not left behind who don't have equitable access to this. The third point is around ensuring that there is citizen-centric and community participation-led efforts. And to that end, wherever there is bottom-up local self-government, that enables civic participation. And if that starts reflecting into how you're designing your technology platforms, how, say, a public direct benefit transfer system is being designed for going to the grassroots, that leads to much better outcomes than a top-down approach. And last point I would say is when societies and governments are designing for better public outcomes, it has to be a whole of economy approach. And to that end, you need to take private sector along, but at the same time, the difficult part, such as putting in the infrastructure, the public digital infrastructure, the railroad on which some of these services which will provide equitable access, those need to be put in place through public investments, through public efforts. And these are not going to be easy. These are going to be long-term investments. But if we can take heart from and learn from the success of payment infrastructure and digital identity infrastructure, which have been very, very helpful, I think these steps can advance equity and inclusion. I'll pause there and give it back to you, Dr. Mahmood.
Thank you so much. We could go on and on, but I think Melissa is going to try and signal me soon to wrap up, and I will do that. I think we've had a really rich discussion. We've heard, a range of views from whether it's from a rights perspective, and I was just thinking, and as someone who's was a former employee of the UN, and the Declaration of Human Rights was very much, our clarion call, right? Maybe it is time for us to look at even digital rights. What is that? What will that look like in terms of a declaration? We've heard also about the importance of good governance, about a collaboration and partnership, and very importantly, inclusion, and continually pushing the boundaries in trying to see how the digital transformation can actually help us in the way, in our future. But I must say that at the end of the day, the digital transformation is a means for us to secure an end that we want, and that is not leaving anyone behind. And at the end of the day, not forgetting the power of people, the power of democracy, and how do you bring the best out of humanity, so that we will all be heading in the right direction, and we will always remember that COVID-19 was this great opportunity for us to try and move forward on digital transformation. We've heard it over and over in every conference or every meeting that you've had. I can't leave without, I need to ask Achim one question, and that is, I know how passionate you are about the environment, just as I am. And I think that we will all agree that COVID-19 didn't happen out of the blue. It is because of our relentless push for development and profit that we have violated all our planetary boundaries and led us to where we are now. This is not going to be the last pandemic or epidemic. We know that, we have more to come. And I think it was a very good discussion around preparedness as well, and how digital transformation can help us prepare. Achim, will digital transformation help us protect our planet?
I think just like in any other aspect, the answer has to be yes, but it depends on how we use it. I think the technology possibilities, just imagine we are able to observe environmental change, planetary change now with, satellites orbiting around planet Earth. We have the ability to track forest fires in real time from a satellite. So the ability, in the old days, you did not even have access to these areas. Sometimes it would take days to report. We can also see changes in terms of many other parameters of what is happening to our oceans, to our land, and to ecology. So I think that is one aspect. Simply having the data, the information in real time allows us to act much more deliberately. Secondly, I think it is also a way in which we can envisage the deployment of new technologies. The transition to a clean energy economy becomes far more viable, far more feasible when you have the kind of digital infrastructure that allows you, for example, to have pay-as-you-go systems. We now have already in a number of African countries, companies that are able to bring their capital, invest photovoltaic technology in villages, and essentially have a pay-as-you-go smartphone platform. So access to off-grid electricity becomes not only technologically possible, it becomes a viable business proposition. And so just like digital finance, digital infrastructure, digital information systems, we are, I think, moving to a profoundly transforming phase where these assets suddenly become affordable, usable to the vast majority. The question is, can the way we shape our economies and the way we also introduce sustainability into that next chapter in development, the next normal, as you both said, take advantage of the knowledge we now have. And I think climate change is our next frontier that will test us not in 20 years' time, literally in the next 5 years to 10 years' time. So yes, I'm optimistic, but nothing ever happens just because it's possible.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all our panelists, and thank you so much to the participants and those who are watching this. Thank you, UNDP, for giving me this opportunity to moderate this esteemed panel. And back to you, Melissa.
Thank you, Dr. Jamila, for leading that incredibly rich discussion. There was so much to absorb and to process from that. Again, thank you to members of our panel a little earlier. While we think about all the things that have been said, it was really wonderful to hear the experiences of different countries within the region. Sometimes we get so focused on what's happening within our own borders that, you hear, you see what's happening in other countries, and you think, oh, that's great solutions are being implemented, just next door. So it's really good to hear from the region as well. I want to take this opportunity to perhaps continue that conversation a little bit, tell you about this partnership between the Rockefeller Foundation and the Regional Innovation Center of UNDP Asia Pacific. So they've joined forces in hopes of creating and fostering an ecosystem of data-driven policymaking in Asia. So please allow me to introduce the two leaders behind this partnership. You heard from her a little earlier first, Ms. Kani Vignaraja, and secondly, we have Ms. Dipali Khanna, the Managing Director of the Asia Regional Office for the Rockefeller Foundation. Dipali, I'd like to begin with you first, if I may. The Rockefeller Foundation has really been championing and investing, putting their money behind this, the use of data science to generate real human impact. I'm wondering whether you could tell us a little bit more about that, about the work that the Rockefeller Foundation has been doing in this field.
you so much, Melissa, for that question. And of course, many thanks to Akam Steiner, Administrator of UNDP, Connie Vignaraja, Assistant Secretary General and Assistant Administrator and Director of the Regional Bureau for Asia and the Pacific, Julio, who leads strategic innovations globally, and the entire team from the Regional Innovation Center for inviting me to launch this exciting and important partnership between UNDP and the Rockefeller Foundation. Listening to today's stellar panel discussion makes me even more confident that the work we are collaborating with UNDP for is quite timely and will leapfrog our digital transformation ambitions to create meaningful impact. Before I talk about what we have set out to achieve with UNDP, let me answer your question discussing how we at the Rockefeller Foundation have leveraged data and technology for transformative solutions, specifically leveraging data to build resilient foundations for transformative solutions, specifically in areas of health, energy, food, livelihoods, and financial inclusion. Data-driven innovations have the potential to aid policymaking, improve economic growth, equitably allocate resources, and make public service delivery systems seamless. However, we all know that it is the availability and access to high quality, reliable, recent, and annotated data that determines what problems get tackled and what populations are served. So let me dive right in and discuss the importance of creating high quality and inclusive data sets. The most vulnerable communities are often underrepresented or missed altogether during data collection, leading to their issues often remaining unaddressed. Thus, an enabling ecosystem should strive to provide access to data from government and non-government sources, including that from communities themselves, in an inclusive and equitable manner. An example of how we are working to slingshot data-driven innovations is the Lacuna Fund. This fund is set up to finance the creation, expansion, and maintenance of labeled, localized data sets, beginning with a focus on agriculture, health, and language. It is the world's first collaborative effort to provide researchers, data scientists, and social entrepreneurs in low and middle-income communities with the resources they need to produce labeled data sets and build AI applications that benefit underserved populations, thereby closing the data gap. This month, we also launched Global.Health, which is the first of its kind, easy-to-use global data repository and visualization platform that enables open access to real-time epidemiological anonymized line list data. However, data collection, collation, analytics, and insight generation cannot be done in silos, divorced from each other's evolving contexts. Therefore, it is imperative for us to engage in early field building activities to ensure that there is an enabling ecosystem. Developing countries struggle to navigate the challenges of digitalization and often lack enforcement mechanisms, technical capacities, and human resources required to fully engage in the global data economy. To address these challenges, we have propelled field building activities in India through the University of Chicago's Social Impact Initiative called the International Innovation Corps, or IIC in short. Embedded at the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology in India, IIC aims to catalyze responsible digital innovation through policy and program interventions in data, its governance, and its use for emerging technology. In tandem with key stakeholders from government, research and policy think tanks, the team drives key outcomes for the Open Government Data Platform in India, the National Center for AI, and digital capacity building initiatives for government officials. Stakeholders across the newly connected development data value chain agree that the biggest barrier in realizing the true potential of digital transformation is the lack of a tech-educated workforce, which spotlights the importance of augmenting digital capabilities for governments and civil society organizations. We know that digital transformation needs a strong foundation of data culture, behavior, and innovative thinking, which is why we are building capacities of policymakers as well as civil society organizations. Data science and technology can be critical tools to increase the speed, depth, and accuracy of analyzing social issues, pointing to solutions and innovative investments that can provide impact. To build a data-savvy future leadership and governance ecosystem,
We are engaging with the next generation of governance leaders through accelerated learning programs such as the UNDP's Data for Policy and AVPN's India Policy Lab. Our goal as a foundation is to empower public sector agents of change and to increase the state's capacity in executing and achieving impact goals. It is in this spirit that I'm excited about the partnership where UNDP is working with bureaucrats from India and Philippines towards prototyping data-driven policies towards anticipatory governance models. We're also supporting the Pinting Lab initiative through the Regional Innovation Center to harness data innovations for effective COVID-19 response and for addressing similar future crises. Additionally, in order to build the capacity of civil society organizations with training resources, accessing data sets, and using open source tools for predictive analysis, we've launched data.org along with the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth. Data.org is envisioned to be a platform for partnerships that will continue to build the field of data science for social impact. Through this, we aim to make data sets more accessible while adhering to the principles of responsible data use and support the creation of data governance, standards, and legal frameworks that propel the field forward. We understand that as digital technologies penetrate even more aspects of society, their management will be as much a societal challenge as it will be a technical one. While COVID has accelerated the deployment of AI-powered solutions in the health sector, policy and regulation frameworks that govern research and clinical data must evolve as well to ensure data's ethical and efficient use.
Right.
Data stewardship, which relates to unlocking the value of data while safeguarding the rights of individuals and communities, is at its core. We have a very exciting partnership with the APTI Institute. I won't get into it. I know we're running short of time, but I want to just sum up by reiterating the 4 pillars of building a data-driven ecosystem that I discussed. The first one being creating high quality and structured data geared towards solving the right problems. Second, field building to integrate stakeholders, knowledge, and efforts. Third, digital capacity building. And fourth, accounting for the considerations around data governance. The work that Foundations is doing is more than just our capital. We have networks, technical expertise, knowledge, and convening power, all of which we leverage to support our partners. In UNDP, we see a partner that is as eager or even more eager than us to channelize the benefits of digital transformation to the most vulnerable communities in order to build a more sustainable and equitable future. I hope this is really the beginning of a long-lasting and strategic relationship with UNDP in driving impact in Asia and globally. Thank you to the entire UNDP team.
Thank you, Dipali, for that. I'm sure that you have seen through the Rockefeller Foundation how the power that data science can have for social good. I mean, we've seen with private sector businesses, they've been building and investing and deploying these types of capabilities, data science capabilities for years now. It's heartening to see it being deployed with nonprofits and private sectors using this for social good. Because everyone produces data, but it's time, I think, that everyone benefits from it more equally. So thank you, Dipali, for that. I'd like to bring Kani in into the conversation, please. Kani, UNDP has been working across the globe on various development challenges. So given that you lead UNDP in Asia and the Pacific, what is your vision? What is your specific vision for data-driven policymaking within this region and its particular challenges?
Thank you, Melissa, for that. And such a big thank you to Dipali and the Rockefeller Foundation team. I'm so excited to see this take off. What you may not know is that Dipali and I worked together in Vietnam about 20 years ago. And digital was not a big part of our efforts then. Data was. But it was hard to, one literally had to get out there with a notepad and a pen to collect it. Today we see it's a far more adventurous exploration of data, and vast amounts of big and small data is now generated at higher speeds and intensity than when we would have to go village by village, town by town to collect this. Now, I'm not sure that we can keep pace with all that it is revealing. And the trends and the patterns coming through it's almost like being in whitewater rapids without a paddle, sometimes even without a canoe. So real-time data has become critical for real-time decision-making. And it's such a fast-changing context. And this is why from all of the panelists, we heard that I think, COVID has really shifted our lens on how we go about working. And as Achim said, so has climate change. These are emergencies. This is not what can we do together 10 years down the road. And I think decisions and choices we make now with all this data is going to really set the stage for that world we live in, and not just, as we keep saying, for our children, right? But for now, right now, it's going to make a huge change. So this partnership is looking at not only what we need to know and what is the data science behind that, but going beyond the numbers, what the stories reveal about justice and power and equality. And I think Jamila brought that out so well, as did some of our panelists who spoke to these issues. So it's giving us a sense of direction, of working with policymakers, with leaders, convincing together that there are choices that are better than others. Now, many organizations have spearheaded a culture and practice of open data and working on the basis of ethics and the responsible use of data. So for us, the engagement with Rockefeller was a perfect fit because we have that same value base of what drives our obsession right now with looking at data and using data. And it's way beyond just the excitement of technology and the intellectual excitement of data exploration. So we want our data to bring to light and put light maybe into the room, not to stifle and make dark those corners. Quite the opposite. So it shouldn't be deepening divides between peoples and between countries, as Akim also well stated. The geopolitics between groups, between countries, this can, fresh oxygen can be brought into conversations that take out some of the sting between not understanding differences. And if we can use our work, both on the digital and the data innovations, that can be used, as Sushant said, and Anna said, for the public good, then simply put, we are looking at far more impeccable, values-driven conversation about building capacities, building systems that work for everyone. So we are really proud in UNDP and with our Asia Pacific team and the Rockefeller Foundation that we've joined forces to embark on this journey of data science for policy and to really unleash that kind of dual potential of the digital adventure with the data revolution. And we've begun, as you heard from Deepali and many of our panelists who spoke to some of this work we've started doing together. So very pleased to launch this together with Rockefeller Foundation.
Yes. It's a looking forward to the future of this brilliant partnership. If I may, just before we end, I'm very curious to know, Akim, if you could say a couple of words about this partnership. It's the beginning of the joining of forces, perhaps using data science to make a real human impact. Akim, do you have a couple of words to say at the launch of this partnership?
Well, first of all, to thank Deepali and Kani, not only for having met 20 years ago, maybe in Vietnam, and walked around with notebooks and pens, but for having had the vision of how, in the context of Asia and the Pacific, we can make digitalization also an era of empowerment. I think much of what Deepali spoke to, what Kani just alluded to, it's about empowerment, it's about inclusion. You know, technology can sometimes be, you know, the asset of the privileged. You know, we heard earlier on also when Anna was speaking education right now. There are children who have access to the internet, and there are children who are not. We have over 1 billion kids who were locked out of education. We have seen countries now, I was just reading over the weekend about how in Uruguay, in fact, the government issued now a laptop to every child. You know, that there are basic fundamental decisions that need to be made. Some of them are infrastructure, some of them are access to the technology. India and the promise to connect 450,000 villages to fiber optic cable in the next 1,000 days. These are the infrastructure decisions. And then there are the elements that also empower people to be part of this digital world that is unfolding. And that is what I associate particularly with this new partnership that the Rockefeller Foundation and UNDP are embedded in this extraordinary energy of Asia and the Pacific developing right now. So again, you know, it's so vast, 60% of the world's population lives there. But, you know, sometimes these catalytic partnerships can remove barriers, catalyze, accelerate, multiply. And that is precisely where I hope our partnership will come to fruition. So Melissa, and just a big word of thanks also to you for joining us today.
Thank you, Akim. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our event today. It just flew by, and I hope that you got as much out of it as I did. So before we leave, I'd like to thank everyone for spending time with us today, for taking time out of your day to join the conversation, all the attendees and the speakers. And a big thank you to the organizing team of Istanbul Innovation Days, the Asia Pacific chapter, for putting together this event. Now, I want to thank everyone again. Have a great week ahead. Make sure you stay safe. But before we do leave this Zoom room, can we take a quick photo since we are here all together virtually? Look, I'm going to get the IT person to help us to count us in, and let me see how we can make sure that everyone is in and we can take a quick photo before we leave. How about that? I'm going to count to 3 before someone takes a snapshot. We have Manish controlling. All right, let's count to 3. All right, I'm going to count to 3. Go ahead.
1, 2, 3. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.